The book I would like to present you is King of a Chessboard by Grandmaster Paul van der Sterren, that is a famous Dutch Grandmaster. And the book is about, as you can see already in this kind of caricature of Mount Rushmore, where generally there are the US presidents, here there are the world champions, right? We see Fischer in the center, Capablanca, Karpov, and in reality, when we open the book, we see that practically there is a chapter dedicated to each of them, right? It starts with François-André Danican-Philidor, and then it ends up with Magnus Carlsen. I will present you some of the games of this champion inside this book. There are many fragments which show the most important games that you can find about these champions, but I like the complete games to replay over the board. Hope it will be helpful for both of us, okay? The first game I would like to present you is on chapter 5, page 33, between Steinitz William, the first world champion, against von Bardelen Kurt in Hastings 1895. Hastings 1895 is generally regarded as a highlight in the history of chess. Every great player of the time took part, making a total of no less than 22 participants. 22, can you imagine? These 22 played each other once. The round-robin format had by now become the norm, so the tournament consisted of 21 rounds. The strain and the effort involved must have been tremendous for all players. Surprise winner of the event was the young American Harry Nelson Pillsbury, that was born in 1872, and died in 1906. Who scored about, okay, I don't know what happened here. Okay. He scored 16.5 points from 21 games, finishing ahead of Chigorin, 16 points, world champion Lasker, 15.5, Tarrasch made 14 points, and Steinitz only 13. Steinitz, by now 60 years old, is unlikely to have been happy with his 5th place, but in all fairness can only be impressed by the way he held his own in this exhausting tournament amongst a pack of hungry young wolves. Von Bardelen, the one that you see in this game as black, finished 7 with 11.5 points. Still an excellent performance. This game was played in round 10. At that point, von Bardelen was the only player not yet to have lost a game. Okay, and let's go to see the game. E4, E5, so we are kind of in the romantic era, if we still the open games. Knight F3, Knight C6. Why do I say that? Because you will see the match between Capablanca and Alekhine is all about D2, D4. Bishop C4, Bishop C5, C3, which obviously prevent black from going in this outpost. Knight F6 and D4. This was the main line of this opening, called the Italian game, for many decades. Nowadays, a more prudent setup based on D2, D3 is almost universally preferred. E takes D4, C takes D4. If white were able to consolidate his ideal pawn center, pawn on E4 and C4, and D4, his opening strategy would be a great success. The problem is that black is able to strike back just in time. How does he strike back? Bishop b4, check, knight c3. A pawn sacrifice designed to keep the initiative is the following. Let's see. Bishop d2, bishop takes d2, knight b takes d2. Okay. Okay, but Steinitz didn't play that. So here in the book you can see that the author, that is a grandmaster, gives you also some tips about the games, so you can learn a lot from watching these games. Here it says misunderstanding number 1. Positional play is not the same as a careful approach. d5. Black avoids the critical move knight takes e4, accepting the sacrifice. White would then sacrifice another pawn by playing castle. Based on the assumption that his lead in development outweighs the material deficit. This variation has been known since the 17th century and is still played today, so since the 1600, right? And obviously you need to watch these games because it opens your mind to the fact that you can sacrifice pawns in the opening to gain tempi and development and kill the opponent king, obviously. E takes d5, knight takes d5. White's opening strategy is based on, after knight takes d5 there is castle. White's opening strategy is based on a rapid development of all his pieces. The sacrifice he makes in order to achieve this is of a positional nature. His d-pawn has become isolated. As a consequence, not only will the pawn itself be a liability from now on, for it can be defended by other pawns. This is the meaning of isolated, that there are no other pawns that can help him, right? But also the so-called blockading square in front. This is the blockading square, d5, blockading to block this from advancing, okay? Becomes an ideal square for black to place his pieces, since they can never be attacked by pawns. Ironically, it was Steinitz himself who formulated this principle as a basic rule of positional chess. However, being the great strategist he was, Steinitz also knew the advantages of having an isolated pawn. White has more space, and this tends to give him the initiative. What Steinitz understood better than most is that White really has to do something with his initiative, for if he doesn't, it will gradually pass to black. This game is a prime example. So we see why we need books like this one, because they teach us about, through the games from the past, what was considered important in chess. And in this case we are speaking of an advantage that is kind of volatile, that it will disappear with time if you are not able to do something with it, okay? So he says, misunderstanding number 2, the laws of positional chess are never dogma. Okay, that's very interesting. So, bishop e6, bishop g5, bishop e7, bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5. bishop takes e7, knight takes e7, and rook e1. So this rook e1 is pinning this knight, right? But the point here is another, is that the king cannot castle and escape because this is unprotected. Okay, so let's see what he says in the comment. The point of the previous exchanges, black is unable to castle, so he somehow has to wriggle his king into safety. Still, in a strategic sense, white is walking a tightrope. If black manages to get his rooks into play, the large-scale piece exchange will start working to his advantage. Okay, so yes, what he's saying is that if black is able to bring his rook into the center, he will start to attack this pawn. On the other hand, white wants to exchange all the pieces because then he has a kind of pass pawn that can use to push through, probably. Let's see what happens in this game. I'm kind of interested. I don't remember it, honestly. Maybe I saw it, but I don't remember it. So what did black play? He played f6, queen e2, now is really threatening that, queen d7, rook a c1, and black plays c6. Why playing c6? Because black wants to stop this pawn from advancing and becoming a real problem, right? And let's see what it says in the commentary. In the end, it is black who is over careful. Contemporary commentators suggested that von Bardeleben probably decided against the more natural king f7 because of exchange sacrifice. What is this exchange sacrifice? Let's see. Queen takes e7, queen takes e7, rook takes e7, king takes e7, and rook takes c7, followed by or rook takes b7 or rook takes g7. Yet this endgame would have been infinitely preferable to the text move, and it says watch the diagram in the next page. Watch the diagram in the next page. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, if I may, I would like to give you an advice. Try to play this position against the computer, maybe not too strong, and see if you can win as white, because it's not gonna be easy. And now I will pause the video and go back to the position from which we saw this line. Okay, we were in this position. Black played c6, instead maybe it was better this, also if the endgame in the end was kind of bad, no matter what. Let's see after c6 what happens. So if you were white in this position, what would you play? Because probably this is the point of watching these games, that you want to put yourself in the shoes of the champion and decide what to do. Stennis played d5, a powerful pawn sacrifice which turns the tables. Black cannot capture the pawn with either queen or knight. The knight, of course, because it's pinned, right? So why cannot capture with the queen? Because it will get checkmated. So the only way is this. C takes d5. And now it's black that has the isolated pawn. That's really kind of funny. Okay. And notice, this is now the blockading square. Okay, before it was this because the pawn was going in that direction. This is the blockading square that is in front of this pawn because you don't want him to advance, okay? So generally you play this immediately. Yeah, and in fact he played knight d4. Misunderstanding number 3, strategy and tactics go together well. King f7, knight e6, threatening rook h c8. At first glance it may look as if this move solved black's problem, but in reality white's attack now begins in earnest. How does white attack begins? Try to pause the video and see what you would play. Queen g4. This of course threatens queen takes g7, but it also exposes a crucial flaw in black's defenses, the unprotected queen on d7. g6, knight g5, king e8, and now again put yourself in white's shoes and decide what would you play. So pause the video, think a minute, what would you play if you were white? Boom! Rook takes e7. The brilliance of this move lies not so much in what happens if black captures the rook, but in what happens if he does not take, and in what white does not play here. He could have gone for knight takes h7, which leaves him a safe pawn up in the endgame. And here it shows a line, okay? But Stainis' move brings a far greater reward in the end, but the depth and accuracy of the calculation required are huge. Many players would not have had the courage or self-confidence to go for it, even if they had spotted the move rook takes e7, okay? So, if black takes here, the problem is this, okay? Takes because this is here, and so if he takes back, doom, you take. And so it's really great. Black will win. Of course, you have to calculate all the lines. Okay? In reality, maybe there is something else. Like, for example, you need to calculate what happens if you take king takes e7. In that case, rook e1 is the move to play. Okay, there are clearly a lot of interesting lines, and I think at this point you should calculate. However, von Bardelen played king f8, which is a good move, okay? Rook f7, king g8, and now you see why this game is famous. Yeah, I think I remember, I saw it. King g7, rook g7. This is incredible, right? Because practically is creating a big problem for black, and he continued to take, you know. And here black resigned. That is to say, he left the playing hall and didn't come back. Stainis had to wait for his opponent time to run out before the arbiters could declare him the winner. It was not exactly the behavior of a gentleman, but it shows how much losing a game can mean to a real chess player. And von Bardeleben resignation at this point showed that he was a real chess player, for the final move of white combination still lies no less than 10 moves ahead. And is not so obvious. Now, let's see what happens, okay? After king g8, what do you think happened? Rook g7. Because if he plays this, now there is this, and things are really going bad, okay? take, check, 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 and now, boom, he needs to do this, right? But watch this, knight f7. Can you spot what happens now? Checkmate. So imagine how many moves Stainis calculated. Okay, maybe it was easy because this move are all fours, but it's still a good feat of visualization, okay? So, by the way, the first 5 players, and this is why this book is good, because it gives you a little timeline, historical timeline of how things progress. And it says the top 5 players from this legendary event were then invited to another tournament a few months later in St. Petersburg, 1895-96. This was also a very important tournament. Taras declined, but the other 4, Lasker, Stainis, Chigorin and Pillsbury, battled it out in 18 extremely tough rounds, each player meeting every other 6 times. Again, Stainis did surprisingly well, scoring 9.5 out of 18 and finishing second behind Lasker. However, in a return match for the World Championship a year later in Moscow, Stainis didn't have a chance, and Lasker won with 10 wins, 2 losses and 5 draws. After this match, Stainis' health began to fail, both physically and mentally. He kept playing tournaments and still managed some good results, although not for long, as he died in 1900 in a psychiatric hospital in New York. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the game from this beautiful book, and I will present you some of the other games of the King of Chessboard.